As Donald Trump continues to tell his cult that he could end the war in Ukraine in just 24 hours, Ukrainian President Zelensky and Trump's own former Vice President Pence both agree that he is out of his mind. Intrigued? Then click that like, subscribe, and the alert bell, and enjoy the video. This may be hard to believe given that he's a federally indicted moron who may be soon facing additional federal indictments, but in some small ways, it must be challenging to be Donald Trump, given that you're a politician who has no legislative accomplishment or executive accomplishment on which to run. So you're forced to simply lie when you run for re-election. Of course, given that Trump is a cult leader and the media, particularly conservative media, but even mainstream media, treat him differently and grade him on a curve in a way that they would never with a more serious politician, certainly not a Democrat, I suppose it's still overall pretty easy. And what's interesting about the lies that we're about to cover of Donald Trump is that they pertain to Ukraine, number one. And number two, he's being called out for those lies by both Ukraine's president, who was president when Trump was the president of the United States, so they had a foreign policy, professional relationship. It's not like Vladimir Zelensky doesn't know who Donald Trump is and has never met and worked with him. He did. But also, Trump's being called out for these lies by his own former vice president, Mike Pence. So he's getting criticism, public criticism, from multiple vectors. Now, that may not mean much to his cult, but for those of us who are critically thinking and are not drinking the Trump Kool-Aid, this is pretty funny. So let's revisit the initial claim, which Trump has made again and again. He made it on the CNN town hall a couple of months ago. He made it in this clip here on Fox, the Fox Propaganda Network, during his interview with Bret Baier. Let's hear it straight from Donald Trump.
I would have a deal done in 24 hours from the time we started. And I would tell Zelensky something, and I would tell Putin something, and I'd get him into a room, and I'd tell him again and again. I would have a deal done very quickly. And you know what? The death would stop, and the destruction would stop. Because look, Ukraine has been wiped out.
So, a couple of things. Right there, even there at the very end, he can't help himself but throw in a remark which is, pro-Russia. Ukraine's being wiped out, when actually every objective military analysis conducted not just in the United States but the world over has indicated that even though Russia is still militarily superior, they've gotten the raw end of the deal, which is usually the case when aggressors invade another country, right? They're starting at an asymmetry, and defenders usually have an advantage. But Ukraine has acquitted itself enormously well, retaking considerable swaths of territory that Russia took for them, and in many cases frustrating the Russian offensive. So Ukraine is not being wiped out. But also note the hilarity of what Trump said too. Within 24 hours, I would make a deal. I would get Russia in a room, and I would tell them one thing, and then I would tell Ukraine another thing, and I would tell Russia this, and I would tell Ukraine this, and then we would have a deal, and the death would stop. It's like no substance, no clarification, and you can tell Bret Baier is just like, I don't even know what to do. The guy who promised us, Donald Trump, that we would have infrastructure. We'd have infrastructure week, but failed to do it in 4 years, whereas Biden got it done in under 1. The guy who said he would repeal and replace Obamacare failed to do that. The guy who said he would build the wall and get Mexico to pay for it failed to do that, failed to do that, failed to do that, failed to do that. Trump, his entire presidency is one of failure, negotiating failure, diplomatic failure, military failure. It's just failure, 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 failure. So we have no real evidence of Donald Trump's impeccable negotiating prowess, but he says that he could single-handedly resolve this war in 24 hours, which then begs the question, why aren't you doing it now? Or why aren't you advising the White House on how to do it? If you care so much and you're so talented and you can get it done, why haven't you done it? Why aren't you trying to do it now? And what is it furthermore about the presidency that, what's special about the presidency that requires you to win the election to do this incredible act of negotiation? What are we missing? Right? Now, obviously, the truth is he's just lying, right? He's making a bald, baseless claim for which he has no evidence, and people will take him at face value when they shouldn't. Now, having said that, let's play the response of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky when asked about Donald Trump's repeated claim that he could just resolve the war single-handedly. Let's hear what President Zelensky has to say.
Donald Trump says he would end the war in 24 hours if he was elected president.
It seems to me that their sole desire to bring the war to an end is beautiful. But this desire should be based on some real-life experience. Well, it looks as if Donald Trump had already these 24 hours once in his time. We were at war, not a full-scale war, but we were at war, and as I assume, he had that time at his disposal. But he must have had some other priorities. If we are talking about ending the war at the cost of Ukraine, in other words, to make us give up our territories, well, I think in this way Biden could have brought it to an end even in 5 minutes. But we would not agree.
So that's a great point by President Zelensky. Okay, Russia had already invaded parts of Ukraine, Crimea, and taken that from Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine were in hostilities, not active hostilities in the way that we know them now. Like, of course, Russia, wasn't sending troops necessarily in the way that they were. And so Zelensky points out, like, Russia and Ukraine were beefing when Trump was in office. He had more than 24 hours. He had 4 years to handle this, and yet he didn't get it done. And again, by the way, Trump didn't cite any presidential powers that he needed. He just said that, he indicated that through his own diplomatic prowess, he could get this done in 24 hours. Well, then do it now, or call up President Biden and be like, hey, Joe, I got the secret sauce right here. And that's just taking his claims at face value, which, again, we shouldn't. But if we do take his claims at face value, then he's basically extorting his secret sauce or whatever to end the war as a way to reelect him. You have to put me in power first before I stop this grave humanitarian crisis, which is Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which is killing hundreds of thousands of people. But I'm not going to do it until you make me president first. But obviously, again, we shouldn't take it at face value anyway because he's full of crap. But the other person who's criticizing him is his own former Vice President, Mike Pence. And hear what Mike Pence has to say.
My former running mate likes to talk about solving it in a day. The only way you'd solve this war in a day is if you gave Vladimir Putin what he wanted. And I got to tell you, they're all meeting in Vilnius in Lithuania, Bill, this week for NATO. And I got to tell you, if I really believe, and I've met Vladimir Putin, I've looked him right in the eye, I would tell you, if Vladimir Putin overruns Ukraine, if he simply wears down the United States and the West, I have no doubt in my mind that he's going to cross a border, maybe Lithuania itself.
So there you have it. I mean, he goes on to discuss the broader diplomatic issue, but what he's saying is the only way that Trump, and this is what Zelensky said too, the only way that Trump could solve this in 24 hours is a total unconditional surrender of Ukraine to Putin. Give Putin everything he wants and the war would end. Well, duh, but that's not the sort of end that anybody's advocating for. Anybody could do that. Zelensky could do that. Zelensky could end the war in 24 hours if he just, waves a white flag and says, hey, Vlad, whatever you want, buddy. So again, nobody should take Donald Trump seriously, and it's just funny to see that even the milquetoast, spineless Mike Pence is calling Donald Trump out publicly, and Vladimir Zelensky himself he's being diplomatic. He's like, he had more than 24 hours to get this done. Nobody, internationally, domestically, nobody takes Donald Trump seriously, nor should they.